If you work in utility safety or ops, you know the landscape changes fast. New safety solutions, updated grounding procedures, and the constant push for better leadership. It's a lot to keep up with. That's where Incident Prevention Magazine comes in. We are the industry's go-to source for real-world safety solutions. From in-depth articles on arc flash protection to ready-to-use tailgate topics for your crew, IP gives you the knowledge, insight, and strategy you need to get everyone home safe. Don't just react to the job, stay ahead of it. Subscribe today at incidentprevention.com. That's incidentprevention.com.
Good day to everybody. Danny Raines here, Voice of Experience, back again. And we would like to present something today to you. It's a program called Accepting the Unacceptable. There's so many things happening in the industry, and even this year during the ice storms and everything else. And my heart goes out to the linemen and to the people and the employees of the electrical industry that's out there working. I know I used to do that years ago, but there's so many been hurt and tragically hurt. And I've even heard of one fatality. I'm not sure if it was related or not, but I think they were driving. It was not an electrical contact, but there's been 2 or 3 electrical contacts and people are recovering, and my heart and prayers go out to you and the family, and I just hope everything is okay. This program is a result of things like that happening in the past. Several years ago, one of my customers, the state co-op association, asked me to build a program for them. And I asked the director, what do you want me to talk about? He said, there's so many things happening out there, and there's so many people that know better, that maybe see it or doing it and have been trained better, and it still happens. And I thought for a minute, and that's how it got its name, Accepting the Unacceptable. So as you can see, and most of you that watching this program know me, and hopefully, and remember me, and of course nothing's changed except just getting a little older. But I've been in this business a very long time. I've done a lot, seen a lot, participated in a lot of things, investigations and court cases, testimonies, depositions, and it's just sad to see the result of the unacceptable, and that's what drives it. So there's the name, Accepting the Unacceptable. So what does that mean? Well, it's kind of like an article that I'm probably going to write for the next, I think, April issue. It'll come out, and it's about failed leadership. When does leadership begin, and when does it end? And what is the result of failed leadership? And so it's kind of along that same theme right there. It's all about preventing things from happening, incidents and accidents, and it's just things that, everybody kind of builds in the philosophy that things are going to happen to us because of what we're doing. I know a lot of the social media posts I see now are, it's the most dangerous job. And, Forbes magazine said it's the most dangerous job. It's very, very hazardous job is what it is. And it really becomes dangerous when you don't follow the rules and regulations. When you follow the rules and regulations, you're in control of that situation. And if all the I's are dotted and T's is crossed, we usually come out pretty good. But it's really all about leadership, as I said, and human performance. What is human performance? Human performance is what we do and why we do it, and maybe a little bit of when we do it, because that performance may change it may change from one level to another. It depends on where we're at, what time it is, how long we've been working, who's watching. Oh my goodness, don't go there. So operating in an unacceptable manner, you're certainly going to increase the incident rate or severity rate. It affects the system reliability for who you're working with. And of course, it increases the possibility of tort liability. And that's been involved in a lot of those things in the last few years. And it gets really ugly when things go to court. And then, of course, reputation, your company reputation, your crew's reputation. Everybody's affected by the unacceptable work practices if we allow that to happen in our presence. The definition of of it is accidents or close calls caused by human performance failures or leadership, accepting less than is required. You know, I've been working on a case this morning and been getting an opinion together about rubber gloves. Everybody has an opinion, kind of like noses and other body parts. We all have one. But, there's also guidelines, regulations, standards that these opinions must be based on. And it's not our personal opinion. It's what we are required to do. And that's the main thing. We have some of these opinions or feelings like, well, safety, performance of someone around me. That's not my job. That's the boss's job. I'm out here just to work. I've had that told to me straight in my face. And I'm going, oh, come on, guys. You got to be kidding me. It results, directly from on-site decision making. In other words, what are we about to do right now? And, and how are we going to go about doing it? Well, first, I know how I've done it in the past, but two, how was I trained to do it? Ooh, maybe two different roads we can go down. And usually that's what happens out here. Well, these are numbers that comes from the National Safety Council and other places, in the like NIOSH, National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, that does all the legwork for OSHA. 90% of human errors right here cause operational upsets. And it's the human errors as a result, system-induced error. And, of course, slips, trips, lapse of memory, lapse of whatever, following the rules. About 30% of it. But 90% of the 70% is us. It's us. 10% equipment failures. Well, that's going to happen occasionally. But, we can have some control over that too. If we inspect our equipment and and our fleet management is up to par, which they are most of the time, and those inspections are done daily, whenever you test those lower controls. I mean, something will show up to tell you that an operation or an equipment failure may be imminent. Here's what I'd like to illustrate here. Of course, that's kind of hard to see, but if you look close, that's what it was. Somebody's catching trouble and storm trouble, whatever, and they didn't have a sleeve, so they just put two squeeze-ons in there and squeezed it up. Yeah, that's going to work, but it don't need to be left like that. It needs to be, completely repaired later on. This particular bank of transformers right here, we drove up on crew that was down there picking up primaries. And if you look close, right along in here, you can see a lightning arrestor that's blown. That B-phase lightning arrestor right there is hanging. There's the end of it hanging down. And, of course, I asked the gentleman, I said, why don't you go ahead and change that lightning arrestor before you make it back hot? And while you got the line out, because they was picking primaries up. And that guy turned around and looked straight at me and said, it ain't my job. I'm here to pick primaries up. I said, come on, man, you just going to leave this. Now somebody else has got to come back in here and have a scheduled outage on this bank and change that lightning arrestor. That's kind of the things that kind of gets under my skin a little bit. Of course, I have some humorous pictures in here, and I have some pretty nasty pictures in here too of injuries. So, get ready for that, because you may or may not like what you see. That's some of my wiring right there up in my attic. No, it's not. But to prove a point, somebody left. And look at that old knob and tube wiring right there. This is old stuff, and I don't know where this picture was made. Somebody gave it to me. I took this picture here myself, and this was a contractor preparing to do reconductoring on a three-phase line. It's in Florida. We were on vacation down at the beach, and I walked out of a restaurant and I looked up, and of course, old Danny, he's always got a camera. I looked up and I saw those bare spots up there, and I talked to the young man that's in the bucket right there with his back to us, and I said, Bubba. He dropped down. I told him who I was, and I said, well, I was looking at your cover up, and he said, what's wrong with it? Well, you see, he doesn't have rubber gloves on. And of course, a lot of people wear sleeves. Some don't. I never did, but rubber gloves, bare spot here, bare spot right there. There's a stirrup right there at the end of his boom. There's no path to ground covered up. There's a Mac hanging hard against the pole. There's a rated piece of equipment against a difference of potential. Neutral, ground's not covered up. And I said, well, and I told him, I talked cover up. And he says, I said, you got all those bare spots. You don't even have your rubber gloves on. And he said, well, I'm not planning on getting around those bare spots. Well, I said, well, bless your heart, brother. I hope you make it, but I'd put cover on it if I were you. Well, lo and behold, I came back by there a little while later. He never did put any more rubber up there. He got everything done, everything framed. The rollers were up there, the blocks, P-lines were in it. Nothing ever happened. See, now that proves a point right there. That's one of the points I always, when you're working what I consider to be an unacceptable and a violation of regulations, we are that good that we can do the work and nothing will happen. But occasionally something will change, and that change is usually what results in those serious incidents and accidents and even fatalities. I mean, you look at last year, and I lost track of how many fatalities we had last year because of the all the things that was going on with me. I had several things with personal things, but I understand there was between 25 and 30 fatalities last year. I said, oh my goodness, why? We got better equipment, we got better training than we've ever had, but yet we still have the same thing over and over again. And this has been going on since the 90s, and really before that. The statistics I have in my training programs and cover-up programs started in the mid-90s. And we average that many fatalities, a flash about every week. Now, he didn't have one, but did he have the potential for having one with all these bare spots around and no gloves on? Like I say, good Lord looks after us. Now, I know there's a difference of opinion, and we don't build rubber trees, and I had someone tell me the other day that I'm not in a job to build a Salcor rubber tree, and I'm just here to do the work. I don't need all this. And of course, I think, I don't advocate a rubber tree at all. I advocate creating a safe work environment that I could work in. And if I make a mistake, I won't pay the highest penalty for it, because I'm human too, when it comes to human performance. Well, a lot of people say it takes too long to rubber it up. It's too much trouble. I need to hurry up and get through. Why? You're getting paid by the hour, aren't you? Not going to get to run late today because I got somewhere to go. All this takes too long. It's just just takes too much. So why unacceptable? Attrition, maybe new employees inexperienced. And I think really when you look back on the days, when I first started doing consulting and safety training back in the 80s and 90s, we would have storms and we would have a lot of things happen. And it seemed like the worst things happened to the most experienced people out there. And I don't know, maybe it was Jack Lacey said, don't get too comfortable with it. Okay. And maybe that's what happened to those experienced people. But if I look today's world, it seems like the younger folks today, the more inexperienced, and it's no fault of theirs, because if you hadn't been out there doing the work for 20 years, you're not going to have 20 years worth of experience. If you didn't have the right person training you, you're not going to have the correct experience you need, trained to the facts of what you should be doing. So improvising, just like using squeeze-ons instead of sleeves. Well, sometimes I just know better, but I decided to go the easy way. Well, that's a bad path. It's like somebody told me a long time ago, you have two buckets when you come into this industry. You have a luck bucket that's full. You have an experience bucket, which is empty. And as you fill that experience bucket up, you're using the luck bucket up. And sooner or later, that luck bucket's going to run out. And in that easy way might get you in trouble. You never know. If you're operating acceptable, it implies minimums. Well, I hear people say, well, I'm operating by the regulations. Well, regulations, OSHA regulations, and industry standards has been agreed to that's the minimum amount of precautions and practices we need to take to do the work safely and not be injured. So, it's far from operating excellent. If, we consider a minimum excellent, no, we're just legal. I mean, that's all you're doing. Now, if you wanted to do a little bit more than the minimum, more than the regulation, that's fine too, but you can't do anything less. Well, the question you have is, how can you be best at preventing unacceptable work practices and operating at a minimum? Well, the definition of insanity is doing it over and over again, expecting a different outcome. That's why we keep losing 25 or 30 people and having a flash or a contact every week. I recount one time that I was doing a 30-hour class for a company, and I got through with it on Thursday afternoon and started home. And I found out on the way home, my phone started ringing. That Thursday, there were 4 different incidents, and 3 of them were fatalities, and one of them was a major contact with loss of limbs. All of that happened on Thursday. That Thursday. That's scary, that's there's a loss of leadership and a failure of leadership. There's a failure of, the principles of following your training, recognizing the hazards. There's a lot of things going on right there. But to me, it's a failure in many forms and fashions. Webster's dictionary says a leader is somebody that leads a movement. It's a guiding or directing force. Well, who is that? Who gets paid to be leaders? When you're talking about leadership, you're talking about supervision, or you talking about leadership? You can be the newest person on the crew and be a safety leader. Well, now the psychologists say, and this is not my words, this is theirs, 90% of the world says, nope, I don't want no part of leadership because I don't want the responsibility, the accountability that goes with it. And then, of course, there's other reasons too. You might lose them overtime or something if you're in supervision and management. Well, acceptable operational excellence that's what we really need, is operational excellence. If you operate excellence, you're doing everything right. It requires acceptable safety leadership along with, making the difference, reducing the number of things that happen to us. And then it can only come as a result of you, the employee, and me, or I, the employee, and the consultant or the leader working together. And that's what it's going to take. I just don't, for whatever reason, there's too many things happening out there that, to me, is a result of that. They're not working together. I think we're trying to do too many things at one time. Operating excellence is what? Everybody working acceptable. Everybody following the rules and regulations. Okay. Not accepting anything or actions or anything else less than what's expected or has been trained to. Well, if I hit the wrong button again, looking out for each other. I think that's a failure. And then not allowing fellow employees to make mistakes. I did not investigate this accident, but this accident occurred right down the road from my house a few years ago. And I was a young 23, 24-year-old, quote, a journeyman, unquote. Had only been in the business 2 or 3 years, which that's a hard pill to swallow. But he took his rubber glove off and stuck his hand trying to tighten a nut up on an arm bracket for a switch. And after he took his arm, basically he had his hand on the switch bracket on the wood arm, and he bumped a hot face that wasn't covered up. And he became a fatality. And the last thing that was said to that gentleman from another person in the bucket across from him was, I wouldn't take my rubber glove off to do that. And the last word he said was, I got it. That is sad. I mean, that hurts. That breaks my heart. I'm telling you, to hear that. I want to be my brother and sister's keeper. If there's anything, and if you get mad at me because I question what you're doing and it's not right, I'm sorry. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. I will intervene every time. I stop on the side of the road and say, hey, why don't you have your harness on? You're in a bucket. You may not be working on a red light, but you need a harness. fall protection applies to you too. Well, compliance is minimal, just as I said earlier. Rules and regulations, legal definition, that don't mean you're operating excellent. That just means you're legal in the eyes of OSHA and other agencies. Performance standards are minimal. That's just remember, statistics and research indicate this standards and rules are not followed. That is the most amazing thing that I guess I'm in my simplistic little mind of mine. I thought everybody generally followed all the rules. But yet when I investigate accidents, and I have many of them where, limbs or hands are burnt off or arms are burnt off, and then they blame it on failures of rubber gloves, or they blame this. But yet you go back and look at the accident, I can see 3 or 4 things that was not done that should be done and that I hope was taught. And they chose not to do them. No. That's accepting the unacceptable. Unsafe human performance, that's all that is. It leads to unacceptable work practices. There's my first line crew. Not really. But I point this out, if you look, there's these guys who got leg irons on here. I guess he was a truck driver, but who is this fella right here with the vest on? And he's a straw bolts, I think is what we used to call him a long time ago. Well, his job was out there to get things done. Was he concerned about these fellas' safety? I don't think so. Because back in those days, that was about 1928, 29, I think, is when this picture was taken. I think the mortality rate back then was about 50% of the people that went into our industry, they were carried out. They never walked out. So, Dwight Eisenhower made a comment, said leadership is the art of getting someone to do something you want done because he or she wants to do it. Now, you know how hard that is? Think about that for just a minute. When you want somebody to do something and they don't want to do it, how hard is it to get them to do what you want done, or what should be done is a better description, I think. Well, the qualities of this leadership here come from several different directions. Training experiences builds that credibility. Like I said, I was working on something this morning, trying to clear up testing of rubber gloves. And, I had to go through ASTM standards, updated standards, and then I finally went to one of the testing laboratories and verified what my assumption or what my interpretation of the standards is. And of course, we were all in agreement. You got to have credibility if you're going to be a leader. You can't, if you're a plumber trying to tell an electrician what to do, that might not work. Okay. Dependable. You got to be dependable. You got to be there when you're supposed to be there, and you need to stay there until you're not needed anymore. You got to be honest. You got to be trustworthy. That gains the respect. Okay. The personal leadership style is determined by the ability to communicate and personality type. It's one of the things that Nick and I have been doing on these podcasts is doing a little leadership training and human performance training. And we're going to talk a little bit about it in here and this one here too, because I think it is so important that we discuss this. Unacceptable work is a product of risk drift. We're human beings. We're accustomed to accepting a certain level and amount of risk. It's not danger, risk. Okay. I put my rubber gloves on and I don't do an air test on them or whatever I'm supposed to do to inspect them and then go up there and put my hands on a primary. I'm taking a risk. Okay. But I'm taking a risk even if I did all that, and I might have missed the pinhole in it or something. You never can tell. If I don't put a gut on a face or a blanket on a dead end or a shield on a pole and try to provide that equipotential work zone to where if I do make a mistake, I'm not going to suffer, a contact, an entry and an exit point on my body, because that don't work really good. Inconsequential actions certainly lead to these things. And like I said, we don't always pay the fiddler when we dance. Now, that boy in that bucket a while ago was dancing, okay? He was dancing all around that hot stuff and those grounds, and none of it was covered up like it should. Well, some of it was, but most of it was not. The grounds weren't, for sure, or difference of potential. We don't always pay. And that's what leads to complacency. Basically, we get, oh, well, I did it last time. I can do it again this time. And these kind of things wind up catching up with us after a while. I find a lot of signs along the way and see things, the bitterness of poor quality remains long after the sweetness of a low price. Don't ever think that the low bidder is going to give you the best quality product or the work. Because here's an example of this. I went out to a solar farm, and there was some gentlemen out there terminating once the collectors got in, and then went to the inverter, and then went to the step-up transformer. Well, anyway, this is what I found. If you'll look very closely, these are concentric neutrals off of primaries squeezed to the ring bus in the cubicle that I was in, okay? But they used an aluminum squeeze zone to squeeze two pieces of copper together. That's unlike metallurgic cables. No. Will it work? Yeah. How long would it work? I don't know. Does it increase the possibility of failure? Guarantee you it does. But yet, that's what I found all through this entire, and I don't know how many transformers, how many collectors that I found it in as step-up transformers, but let me tell you something. I told him, I said, you need to fix all that. That needs to be a copper squeeze zone. Well, it is always that electrician that will leave a trap for somebody. And fortunately, we found this trap, or the serviceman did, and called me, and I took this picture right here a long time ago. He just jumped out. He had finished wiring this, and he was checking his, equipment out, the receptacles and lights and everything. But he only had a piece of Romex on a 3-phase service, so he basically jumped one phase out to another to get all 3 phases hot to check the receptacles. And then he picked his Romex up and left, put the cover on the panel, and left his jumper. And, of course, somebody, which is really good, went there to hook the quadruplex service back up to the bank pole, and they rang it out like they're supposed to, and bingo, we found it, avoided a problem. That's working, at a higher level than minimums, okay? In other words, they're following their training, and they found it, but they were diligent enough to do the right thing. I can't begin to tell you what this is. This is... Is that working unacceptable? Well, I didn't have a breaker to put it in, so I just put a screw in and didn't even put the right turn. I got a right-hand screw and a left-hand turn on the wire. I didn't even put it on right. Well, anyway. And then again, too, oh, wait a minute, I didn't have a bucket truck, but I had a bunch of pallets and a box and a forklift, no fall protection. But see, nothing's happened in any of these. And that's the point. You can work unacceptable many, many times, many, many days, months, years, and nothing happened to you. And then sooner or later, chances are all you're doing is increasing the odds of something going bad wrong. So correcting it, okay? How we correct the unacceptable? Well, who does that? You expect your supervisor to do that, or your general foreman to do that, or your manager to do that, or your safety person? Don't go down that road. Employees must identify the unacceptability of work practices and correct it on the job site. It ends right there and begins right there. Because if we don't end it, the beginning continues on, okay? Poor and unacceptable stuff that's out there must be immediately corrected. I ask people all the time when I'm in training, I said, well, who's responsible for employee performance? And of course, everybody says, well, I am. Well, you should be accountable and responsible. It depends on who I ask, too. If I ask the employee, that's what I'd expect. What if I ask the employer? They'd say, well, the supervisor is responsible for it. What if I were to ask OSHA? Well, the employer is ultimately responsible, and they're not even on the job site, but they're still held accountable for the performance of every employee out there. So just remember that as you go through your work. I mean, somebody else far up the food chain from us is going to wind up biting a bullet on it. So they are not only responsible, but accountable for everybody's performance. But they can't correct it because they're not there. And many times management, they don't know what we're doing. They expect supervisors, trainers, consultants to do the training for them to represent their company to be sure everything's right. Even if they saw something really bad wrong, they'd probably a fall protection. Oh well, PPE. That's low hanging fruit. The things that really gets us in trouble is the things that they might not even recognize, but employees can. Fall protection is fall protection, right? Yeah, that's good. Well, you have. I don't think that triplex service is actually meeting the fall protection standard. The attachment point is supposed to be rated 5,000 pounds, I think, per person. Oh, not quite. Yeah, well, that was not either. So, and then of course, I look and I find things, and I just shake my head. I mean, I literally just shake my head. These people here were building a 345 bus. Well, it was a tie line. If you look behind them, you can see it coming in from one side. There's a substation to their left, screen left, stage left of this picture right here. And they're pulling the two bundle conductors out of the substation, which is deaded in on a hot 345 switch, okay? And they're raising Cain up there, saying this stuff's eating us up. Well, I blew that picture up a little bit. Now, I'll let you look at that and tell me what's wrong with that. That's the static wire right there. So you kind of see what I'm talking about. One, it's not even grounded right. I'm sure that this was the last one that was put on because there's a shotgun stick hanging there. And they didn't even start. They're supposed to put it on the ground first and then go to the conductors, but that didn't work either. And they're trying to figure out why they're getting static off of it. Well, I think static is induced voltage, but still, they were getting banged up pretty good because they didn't have it grounded properly. So, but now the bad part about this is, I hate to even say this. These are 2 or 3 guys here that just graduated an apprentice program and just made journeyman linemen in just the last few months or a year at the most. And this is the way they were grounding. Is this what was shown to them how to do this in their apprenticeship training? I don't believe so. I mean, if you only ground one conductor of the 2 bundle face conductors, you're depending on the spacers to actually hold the available fault current. That's not going to work. There's no rating on a spacer. You got to have a cable on it, the right size cable for the amount of what's identified. Well, again, too, there's some humor in all this, but this is a real picture from storm trouble. I guess they ran out of Serbians or something or squeeze on, so they just put 2 zip ties on it. They got the lights back on. Now, it won't probably stay on long because first time they put a little load on there, it's probably going to burn everything up. But this kind of goes to show you here the point I'm trying to make. It was accepted and it was unacceptable. Well, let's talk a little bit about human performance principles. That's what I'd like to talk about in just a few minutes. First and foremost, just like myself and everybody around me, we're human beings. And employees are fallible because we're human beings. There's plenty of opportunities for unacceptable work. They're predictable. And then, of course, unfortunately, we get high levels of performance is based on encouragement and reinforcement. Whether you do it, it's like I used to tell people all the time. We'd go on a hurricane or something from Southern Company, and we'd go to the coast and we'd work 2 or 3 weeks and get 100,000 people on. And they'd come back and, we'd come back and all of a sudden we'd be getting a jacket or a hat or a knife or some memorandum, memorabilia. Y'all did a great job. You got the lights on. Nobody asked how we got them on. It's just the fact that we got them on. You see what I mean? So there is the performance and encouragement and reinforcement, which actually encourages you to do whatever you did the last time, whether it be right or wrong. even though nothing happened. Environment and employees influence performance. I guarantee you. It's where we're at, how we're working, and who we're working with has a whole lot to do on how well we do what we do. People are fallible, and even the best make mistakes. I guarantee you. And then some of them are still in training. And look at that. There's another one. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know where those pictures were made. I didn't have anything to do with them. But the mistakes are made by the inexperienced, untrained, or the best in the business. And of course, I'm a pilot. I fly planes. I don't fly F-16s, but I fly something a lot smaller than that. But the bottom line is this gentleman right here has come out of this F-16 because he made a mistake. And when I say even the best make mistakes, that's Thunderbirds. That's Air Force Thunderbirds. Unless you Navy Blue Angels, that's the best of the best. And all he did, certain things you do on checklists before you leave the ground, and one of them is set your altimeter to the ground level. And in that way, you adjust the AGL to the MSL, mean sea level to the ground level. And he missed it by 500 feet. And so when he was doing his exercises and he was pulling to the ground after doing a big Immelman or something coming down, he looked down and he said, "Oh," and he knew then there was a problem. And so he pulled and left. The problem with linemen is we're in a bucket up there and we make a mistake like that. There ain't nowhere to go. We have to stand there and eat the fire, turn our back, jump out of the bucket, whatever it takes. It'd be just nice if we just didn't have to do any of that anymore. Even this right here, communications on the job site. And just to kind of save you a lot of time right here, and I don't want to spend a lot of time, but this is another mistake, and this was nothing but human performance. Okay. See the burn mark on the corner? There's another burn mark here. These are the insulated cover bushings off of way 4. This is a Vista switching cubicle. He was supposed to pull them off of 3 that was de-energized. 4 was hot. 2 was hot. 1 was hot. You see 3 right there is locked out. There's a lock and a tag on it. But you couldn't look at it from the other side of the terminated side. It was 600 amp bolt on the elbows with a 200 amp bushing on the back of the elbow to where we checked voltage and ground. And that's what he was trying to do, is verify the absence of voltage barehanded. Because he forgot, somebody told him it was hot. Because the last time he was there, it wasn't hot. It wasn't energized. Bad things happen. We put the cart in front of the horse, bad things happen to us, okay? Dot the I's, cross the T's, test and verify. I can have all these little phrases and sayings to keep people out of trouble, but it's just amazing. It keeps happening over and over again. Operational upsets, and definitely, managed if we're trained and prepared, mentally prepared, we have the correct teamwork and the correct vision of what needs to be done and understanding. That unexpected operational upset is usually human-related or mechanically equipment-related. And you saw what those percentages were earlier. Now, a good friend of mine, Jeff Odie Espenship, a lot of folks may know him. I've been knowing him now for darn nigh 30 years. Safety and quality productivity all comes as a byproduct of personal value-based craftsmanship. And that's what, Odie flies an A350 now. I think he goes back and forth to South Africa and over to China and Japan and all that. He can't make those mistakes in that big old Airbus. No. But that's why he's doing very similar things that I'm doing right now, but he's just doing them to different companies. But when you look, if you want productivity and quality, then it comes from personal valued craftsmanship. I think we're leaving the personal value out of a lot of the incidents and things that occurred. It's just an opinion. It's a talented art of pursuing perfection. You've got to, when you're flying an airplane, whether I'm flying my Cherokee 180 or whether he's flying an A350, it doesn't matter. You know, this the linemen and pilots have two things in common, and that's what I've always said. Um, both of us, both the individuals are operating, flying, driving, operating very complicated equipment, doing very complicated jobs, if you will. But then the other ingredient is we're all human beings. We are all fallible and we can make a mistake. And what in airplanes it's called cockpit resource management. That's when you work together as a captain and a first officer to be sure you're looking after one another. I'm not sure we're looking after one another like we should. Well, another very unfortunate accident right here. No good deed goes unpunished. And this resulted in a fatality right here because somebody was trying to do something, save time and money, which was, that's kind of that's embedded in all of us. If we can make something better and do it a little easier, then we can. And all he needed was a locate. And he didn't have the correct locates on the gas line and tried to pull a pole and change one out and clean it out and then clean it out with an auger and hit a 4-inch plastic gas main, and you see what happened. Well, again, too, we have putting the cart in front of the horse again. They may change the property lines and, if we take property lines and move them 20 feet one way or another, we can get another lot and get another house in. Well, guess what? It don't always work that way. But anyway, it didn't stop that. If you don't have time to do it right the first time, what makes you think you have time to do it twice? I love that sign. And, that and start, the rest is easy are two of my favorite sayings. Take the time to do it right the first time because, if you're going to get paid to go back and do it again, or you're going to leave a mess for somebody else to have to clean up. And that's basically the unacceptable part of that. It's like this. Every time I look at that picture right there, I kind of snicker. I'm going, good Lord. That was a live front transformer made into a loop feed transformer, and all they did was splice out the cables and put an elbow on them. Now, what should have been done there? That was not done right the first time. So now then, somebody's got to have an outage and go back and pick that transformer up, dig down there, splice all 6 of those elbows or cables, and re-terminate elbows on them and get it like you should. How are you going to switch something like that? This gentleman right here basically was a victim of, improper cover-up, improper use of rubber gloves. This is from Joseph M. Steele Burn Center in Augusta, Georgia, is where it come from. He had a contact. He had an entry on his left arm and an exit on his right shoulder and right hand. And of course, at the end of the day, bless his heart, he's still here. I actually bumped into his neighbor not too long ago, and I think he don't live too far from me right here. But there he is today, and this happened way back in like 2002. But he's been like that ever since. This is what just breaks my heart. When I see stuff like this, it's just like, oh my gosh, why? And again, this is another incident here where somebody made an assumption. Basically, that's an apprentice right there. There's his journeyman lineman down here. And, they were working on changing his cross arm out. And they removed the hotline clamps from these stirrups up top, thinking they de-energized this, but somebody had switched it around. It was feeding backwards. So this was actually hot down here. And when they take the hotline clamps off, they kill the line on top, which is kind of opposite to everything that, we do in the field. But so unfortunate. And of course, he stayed in the burn center, and this gentleman here passed away. And just another statistic. Here's another unacceptable action on a brand new truck. A second grade school teacher and a serviceman were in this truck doing a science experiment for a second grade class. And he stood the inner boom straight up and the outer boom straight out, and it was rotating around. And then half the bolts had vibrated and nuts had vibrated off the bolts on the turntable. And the boom, when it got to the weak side, pop, 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 all the boats broke, and he hit the ground. It killed a serviceman and put the second grade teacher in the hospital. The entire second grade class and their parents was standing there watching all this happen. A brand new truck. And had he followed 1910-269 P3-4 of inspecting that truck before he had got in it, he would have seen those nuts laying in the bottom of the bed of the truck, maybe, and that might not have happened. Very sad. Well, great workman, another gentleman a long time ago made a statement. They tell me you can't teach people carefulness, that you can only learn caution from experience. And I agree with that a lot. I think you respect the carefulness a whole lot more than the caution from the experience that you gain. When he was talking to the employees of this utility company, the matters we deal with are so powerful and deadly that if a man or woman comes in careless contact with them, he doesn't live to try again. And lessons learned from our personal experience do us no good in this world. And that's because, you might not get a second chance.
Check back next month for part 2 in this 2-part series on accepting the unacceptable with Danny Rains.
The views, information, and opinions expressed during this podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of Utility Business Media and its employees. It is strongly recommended that you discuss any actions or policy changes with your company management prior to implementation.